Lost Art with Andrew Cox, retired Master Gunnery Sergeant. thelostart.podbean.com. Get some merchandise and help support the podcast and getting our veteran voices out for all to hear. Now on all major podcast platforms. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be a guest, tell your veteran story, discuss your veteran business or organization. Email The Lost Art with Andrew Cox at gmail.com. Andrew Cox, a Till Valhalla Project Ambassador. See the project story at tillvalhallaproject.com. Thanks for tuning in. Please enjoy the podcast that's giving a voice to our veterans. The Lost Art with Andrew Cox.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast, that podcast giving a voice to our veterans. I'm your host, Andrew Cox, and today we'll be having a My Veteran Story with Lynn Lowder. But before we get into that, are you enjoying the episodes? Then make sure you go to the website. That's thelostart.podbean.com. Go check it out, see what we're all about. We do have a merchandise tab if you want to help support us getting our veteran voices out for all to hear. You can get shirts, you can get hats, you can get cups, you can get all kinds of goodies. Also, I want to give a shout out to the Till Valhalla Project and for allowing me to be an ambassador for their project. They're doing amazing things. If you don't know about them, please go to their website, tillvalhallaproject.com. Go check them out. And if there's any way you can help them out, please do so. All right. I've got Lynn here. Lynn, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. Hope things are
Oh,
good out your way.
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm excited to have you on. You know, I've heard about you through a mutual friend, and he's talked very, very highly of you. And so I wanted to get your story, and I'm excited to finally get you here to do it.
Well, my pleasure to be here. I hope I live up to your expectations. I don't know who that guy is you're talking about, but we
I'm sure you're going to live up to the expectations, no problem. Well, hey, let's start at the beginning for you and kind of explain where you grew up, kind of what that was like, and then how did you get into military service?
Sure. Well, downstate, small town Illinois guy, small rural towns growing up and bounced around here and there. I do remember a couple things. I remember this little town called Lovington we lived in had a post office box. I know I'm dating myself. You'd have to go uptown and you had a post office box, with a combination and all. You'd open up and get your mail. So I
Yep.
walked in there one day and I saw a recruiting poster. I think it was about the fourth grade at that point in time, and it was a rank of Marines in dress blues. And I thought,
Mm,
well, that looked good. I remember that. And then I saw a movie called Battle Cry about a year after that.
mhm.
A story about World War II Marines and so forth, going through boot camp and then into combat. That set in on me. High school had Bob Calvin for a football coach. Coach Calvin was a Korean War Marine, tough guy.
Oh, wow.
Ended up at Vietnam came along later, and had a lot of classmates from this small town, Sullivan at that point. About 100 kids in my class, high school. We had several people went in the military voluntarily, several Marines.
Hmm.
So, long story short, just growing up, I had some. I don't know what it is, Andrew. I saw a couple things like that, kind of burned into my brain, and I always wanted to be a Marine. Came along. Ended up actually graduating from high school. I was the top man in the bottom half of my high school class.
I love it.
So academics wasn't high on my priority. I was able to run a pretty good about a 4.5 40 though, and that's straight up. And I managed to play football at Northern Illinois University in
Oh,
DeKalb
wow.
for a freshman season, two varsity years. But by the end of my junior season, I wanted to quit college and go into the Marines. I felt like I should go. I wanted to be a Marine. I felt like I should go to combat. School classmates were either coming, going, or there. And I'm playing football, and football's a game, but that war was something that was entirely beyond playing a game. So I
Absolutely.
wanted to
Yeah.
be a part of that. Told my wife, a lady became my wife, a student I met at Northern, name is Sandy. I was playing football. She was a cheerleader. She bumped into me first. That's a fact. And And she married me before I went to Vietnam, Andrew, and she's still
Oh, okay.
around
It's
56 years later.
wow.
Just a tough lady of character that just doesn't know when to quit, I think. But she's the greatest blessing I've had in my life, probably, and second only to the good Lord. But anyway, that kind of brings you up to speed. I reckon. I know it was a question 5 minutes ago, but
No, that's
the
fine. No.
sort of the Marine Corps brand that got into me early on in life. I think the older I get, I tell people I don't really believe that there's anything that happens by accident. Really, not one thing.
Mm,
Precious little was hedging.
yeah.
Now, closing in on 80 years on the planet at that percent, I don't believe anything really happens by accident.
Yeah. I would agree with that as well. There's too many coincidences to happen to make it seem like it's all just happenstance.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the kind of page I'm on. But at any rate, that's where the Marine Corps started. Stayed 15 years in the Marine Corps, Andrew. Uh, I enlisted, went to boot camp. The Marine Corps had an enlisted commissioning program at that point,
Okay.
and they still do. The Marine Corps traditionally has always taken a great number of our junior officers in combat from the ranks. I think
Hmm.
proportionally more than any other service. We call them Mustangs in the Marine Corps. You know, there's
That's
thoroughbreds,
right.
there's Mustangs. Well, I'm a Mustang. So, that program was going on, and a good friend of mine was fired up for it. I really wasn't. I just wanted to get to Vietnam, but I kind of went along with what he felt was a good thing, and ended up spending 10 years thing special operations, and then finished up an undergrad degree. And believe it or not, I got and spent my as a jag off, and that was
I think I'm breaking up a little bit. I apologize. I'm gonna check something real quick.
okay. I've got you loud and clear on my
Oh, do
end.
you? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
It must be just the Wi-Fi here is a little spotty sometimes. So
Okay.
um but yeah, sorry. And then where were you? You said you ended up being a JAG officer. Is that what you said? Or
Yes, my
yeah,
last three
okay.
years.
Wow. That's incredible. So, when you enlisted, you said you enlisted and went directly to the enlisted commissioning program. You did that.
Well,
So you didn't enlist and join in, like go to boot camp and then later.
I
Uh,
was a regular camp, Andrew, just like anybody else. That was the way to go. And so I'm a Hollywood Marine. You know, the Marine Corps has
ah,
had two boot camps, one at
that's right.
Parris Island, South Carolina, one in San Diego. And the Marine Corps, we get branded with the title Hollywood Marine. The old timers, believe that Marine Corps and so forth. But anyway, I went to West Coast, and I was spent time as an enlisted Marine by a year and a half before
Okay.
I ended up getting a commission. It was my drill instructor that really also got after me. Um, he really was I'd say he was a father figure without a doubt. Uh,
Yeah.
I had a I had a father, obviously, brought when I was brought into this world. Didn't have any connection. I was one of those troubled kids. I was a runaway when I was a kid. So
Mm-hmm.
I was one of those young men that you knew coming in the military that really needed direction and
Mm-hmm.
purpose. And I believe that after these years, I believe that you and me, men, when we grow from the mother towards the father, I believe that's how we're coded actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to, men are visual learners. We need to see it. And I think young boys need to see how a man of character really behaves, what he says,
Yeah.
what he does more than anything. And Gunnery Sergeant Bell, my senior drill instructor, locked on to me and encouraged me in certain ways and stretched beyond anything I thought I could do. And I look back on it, and he really is the father figure that the good Lord put in my life. And
Yeah.
I still talk about him and give him a lot of credit. By the way, he was black. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm proud of that. Yeah, I'm proud of that. You know, God's ways are not our ways. And uh, oh, well, you're a veteran, you know that. We fight as a
Hmm.
team. The guy on the other side just wants us dead. He doesn't care what color we are, how rich or poor we are, how educated we are. He just wants to kill us. And you and I know
Very
that
true.
on our side of the coin, we all line up, you know, and we're all Marines, period.
Yeah.
And from where we stand, we know the guy on the other side is going to have a long day.
Hmm.
So, yeah, at any rate, we're all his kids, and I'm grateful I ran into Gunnery Sergeant Bell again. No accident, I believe that he was the guy that I was to meet and watch and hopefully grow from.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then now, what was your MOS when you joined up? Like, what was it? Infantry?
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
or as in terms of you and I don't call them grunts. Yeah, I was a
Yeah.
grunt. I was infantry, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And then, so what was the first unit that you actually went to? Because as enlisted first, where did you end up going?
Well, the way it worked, I went out from boot camp. You go to training at Camp Pendleton, California. I
Hmm.
think I'm trying to remember the title that the Army puts to that, AIT or something. Ours was basically infantry training school or
Hmm.
infantry train or ITR when I went to. Then they changed it to infantry training regiment to infantry training school.
Right.
And so there you fire all the weapons that the Marine Corps had at that point, small arms and so forth. Went through training. Then I was put, ultimately, I stayed on staff into the ECP program, and that takes several months to get all the paperwork done. I was with the infantry training regiment there, and I actually became part of a cadre that were working with Marines coming after me, believe it or not. I was in the
Wow.
company of, well, I was in the company of several NCOs. I can recite in my were who had been in combat, had been through it all. And when they found out that I was under consideration to become an officer, these guys, they spent a lot of time with me, telling me things that happened, what to do, do's and don'ts. Remarkable in the sense that these were one term enlisted Marines, one term of enlistment,
Wow.
and they had all been through the drill, and they spent time pouring lessons learned into my head. And I think back on that, they certainly weren't getting any incentive pay for that, but
Hmm.
they were Marines, and they're all saying Marines take care of their own. Well, they sure did help me, and I never did forget that. Then I ended up going on Marine. Andrew, I'd heard about. I wanted to know, you know, football terms.
Hmm.
Better to be the hitter than the hittee, and I who was the toughest who were the toughest guys in the Marine Corps? And I heard from several sources, First Force Reconnaissance Company.
Hmm.
So I wanted to be a recon Marine early on. I wanted to go to First Force, and so a friend of mine, John Slater, and I, we were in boot camp together. He was fire program, me not so much, but we both managed to go to school down at Camp Horno. There were about 5 different camps in Camp Pendleton alone. Camp
Yeah.
Pendleton is huge. So we went down there. We got the MOS. The thought there was if we could get through OCS and if that all worked out, and if we got to Vietnam, maybe just maybe, we would be able to get assigned to First Force Reconnaissance Company, which is in fact later on it happened.
Yeah.
Uh, John got there a few more different story, by the way, but that's kind of how it went. And so,
Very interesting.
in answer to your question, the first operational unit I went to was First Force Reconnaissance Company, uh, Special Operations Unit, very difficult to get into for the most part. They are the grandfather, so to speak, of MARSOC and Raiders,
Hmm.
Marine Raiders. So it's
Right.
special operations. You know, doing stealth work and behind the lines work and occasionally direct action work, and that's where I ended up. That was my first real tour in the Marine Corps, was in combat in Vietnam.
So your first unit, you're stepping into Vietnam into that unit.
Exactly right. Yes.
Wow. Now, and that has got to be absolutely insane, especially as a lieutenant walking in, it's got to be a daunting type of environment at that point.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it got real serious real quick. And when I got to Anwa Combat Base, is where First Force had its rear base. Now, First Force was operating miles and miles away from the nearest friendlies. We were long range recon unit, Laotian border, and in between, but generally speaking, in the area. This is where the NV
Okay.
were operating and where they had storage areas and you name it, hospitals. They had everything out there.
Wow.
So that was the environment. And First Force, when they flew into Anwa Combat, was in a helicopter. A guy named Bob Hansen picked me up. He was our unit. Bob took me down to the area where First Force was located there at Anwa Combat Base. And he said to me, as we were walking into the compound through the concertina wire and all that, he said, drop your sea bag over there in that tent. He said that we got an open cot in there that you can use that. I said, oh, did somebody rotate out? He said, well, in a manner of speaking, yes. He said that
Oh, wow.
lieutenant who was just killed in action. And it was John Slater, Andrew, my friend.
No kidding.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It was a major message. And
Hmm.
I was definitely, I felt I was focused. I wanted to be in everything, but that was okay. Get it together, buddy. Focus in, focus in. You're, and sadly, John was gone. He was a great guy, single, only child. I don't know if I think his parents never got over it. That's understandable.
Yeah.
John was a great Marine, but one of those uh, circumstances that happens, and a wake up call in my case. Let's go, get ready here, because John was one tough guy, and
Oh, yeah.
so we had tough adversaries, that's for sure.
Hmm. Wow. So stepping in first day, I mean, that's got to be absolutely just eye-opening for everything. And you're right on. Hey, I got to get my act together. I got to start going, making sure that I'm doing everything right. And I
Yeah.
imagine that they took you, kind of pulled you in, put you under their wing and started showing you all the ropes and stuff at that point and getting you spun up.
Well, I had the recon training, so I basically reconnaissance from a tactical point of view, but
Hmm.
it was in the sense six-man teams in First Force Reconnaissance Company. Our commanding officer was Roger Simmons. And Roger Simmons and Gunnery Sergeant Trevathan, our company gunny, were the ones that invented the spy rig that's still used in special operations today.
Wow.
It's that nylon strap that hangs down below a midship of a 46,
Right.
CH-46 helicopter, or in the Army, it should have can snap in to that strap. You have six guys all hanging from this strap going up to 3,000 feet in the air,
Hmm.
being pulled out of a hot LZ or whatever the situation happened to be.
Right.
That was invented during my tenure in First Force, and every one of our six-man teams was saved at least once by that spy rig.
No kidding.
It,
Wow.
yeah, if the spy rig would have existed when John Slater was killed, I don't think he would have been killed. I think he would have made it out alive. It's a whole
Wow.
other story. But Roger Simmons invented that, and so if you were going to be a team leader, and I was a
Hmm.
second lieutenant at this point, it didn't make any difference in First Force what your rank was in terms of being a team leader. We had lieutenants, we had sergeants, we had corporals,
Hmm.
young Turks, and so the requirement was at First Force you had to go on 3 snap-in patrols with a seasoned team leader. And the purpose of that was to be evaluated, but you were being evaluated in combat situations.
Wow. Yeah.
So I was evaluated by two sergeants and a corporal. And if they that I didn't have what it took, then I wouldn't have stayed there. That was it. And I always thought really highly of that. Rank is one thing. The special operations community, I just kind of set my temperature, Andrew, for the rest of my time in Marine Corps. I wasn't interested, frankly, in telling a squad leader, you take your squad there, you go there. I just wanted to
Right.
grab a rifle and say, let's go, let's do this thing.
Oh yeah.
And so, leader of a team, we all have a rifle, we all have our hand grenades, we all have everything else. We're all in this together, and we get in a fight, we're all in a fight. So that suited me to a T, and I got that experience right away, and kind of set my azimuth for the rest of my life. Actually, small operations, small special ops. That was First Force.
Yeah. And now, as you're doing your day-to-day operations, when you were there, were you going on daily patrols type of thing? And kind of what was your role within the company?
Well, I was a team leader, one of six, and
Hmm.
so we were very often in the field all the time. I say in the field, we were on patrol out in the enemy's backyard, sizing them up, doing things where we are stealth and observing, and in some cases, direct action, ambushes, prisoner grabs, things like that. It's a pretty heady environment. So we would have our patrol orders, and we would have a safe haven of about four grid squares, as we used to say, or cliques. And we would be inserted, and we had a route to follow and a place to be, a mission, objective, if you will. And
Hmm.
so we knew where we were going. We knew what we were supposed to be doing. We knew the amount of time we were going to be out there doing it. And again, this is in their backyard. So, and there was an extraction point there. We knew we were supposed to be at this point on the map at this point in time to be
Right.
extracted by a helicopter. So our missions typically, remembering back, 4 days, sometimes longer, sometimes less, especially especially if you got in contact. But
Oh
that
yeah.
was more or less the format. And then we would be extracted. We would fly back to our combat base there, Anwa Combat Base,
Hmm.
which was basically the location for the headquarters of the 5th Marine Regiment, Infantry Regiment.
Oh,
And
I see. Okay.
there we would have physical training. We did PT as much as we could, and
Hmm.
we got some sleep, and we would chow down, get some good nutrition into us, and very quickly we were in lock on for the next patrol, next mission.
Right.
So I think that in the 12 months I was there, I believe I led 24 combat patrols
Oh wow.
in contested territory in enemy country. So that pretty much,
Wow.
you got a full platter, believe me. And you
Hmm.
have some people rotating out and some new guys coming in. You got to get them snapped in
Right.
to the unit and to the mission and what we're doing. And you know how it is when you have new guys. They're not viewed as an asset to begin with. They've got to prove
Right.
themselves that they've got wherewithal to do what we need to do as a team.
Oh
Long
yeah.
story short, you're a team leader. You got 6 Marines. You're responsible for every aspect of their life, and so you do a lot of growing up real quickly.
Hmm.
I always told people in terms of combat, youth and laughter are the first things that go. You never felt young
Mm.
ever again, and
Yeah.
combat does what combat does.
Yeah, it's a true statement. Yeah. And you said you spent 12 months over there. Is that correct?
12 months. When we first went, Andrew, the mission or the tour of duty for the Marine Corps was 13 months. About first 6 months or so, at about the 6 month stage, if I remember right, we got the word that the combat tour for the Marine Corps had been reduced from 13 months to 12 months. And that was that was a feel good. That was good.
Yeah.
That was like a month off your prison sentence, so to speak. But it was warmly received, believe me, by everybody. So yeah, that was a good bit of news. So 12 months is the tour, unless something happens. Obviously, wounded,
Right.
injured, or worse, then your tour can be less than the
Right.
12
Right.
months.
Now, what were some of the lessons learned that you had during your combat experience that go around?
Hmm. Interesting question. Well, I learned that the Marine Corps trained us well. The Marine Corps has had for years an ethos of every Marine is a rifleman. Doesn't make any difference
Hmm.
what your rank is, doesn't make any difference what your gender is, doesn't make any difference what your MOS, your military occupational specialty is. Push comes to shove, a Marine is supposed to be able to grab that rifle and go to work and make it count. Put those rounds where they're supposed to be put.
Right.
The other thing, obedience, self-discipline. The Marine
Hmm.
Corps really works that into you. A person without self-discipline is going to be in trouble, not only in the military, but I think for the rest of their life. The Marine Corps does a good job of driving that into people, making that a part of your character. Self-discipline. Do your duty when and where you're supposed to do it, regardless of how you feel about it. Your feelings are irrelevant. Do your job. Do your duty. Show up and get it done. Another way of saying it, a guy asked me one time, Andrew, he said, "What's the most valuable thing you learned from the Marine Corps?" And I said, "To shut up, shut my mouth, do what you are told. Your
Yeah.
feelings just don't matter in situations." You know what I mean? There are people that never have the ability to really recognize you got two ears and one mouth, so listen up.
Right.
But the Marine Corps, that comes pretty quickly. Shut your mouth, do your orders. You do your duty. So thinking back on it, lessons learned, boy, there was a lot of them thinking back on it, but it was the self-discipline and where character and integrity come into that as a platform for
Right.
self-discipline and a successful life. If a man cannot control himself, cannot discipline himself, and to do the right thing, and to do their duty, to do what
Hmm.
they're supposed to do, they handle on doing all we could be life that we're given to live on this planet. And Dad, you've been around too. You
Hmm.
got up, you got to go out there and get a paycheck, pay bills, do things.
That's right.
And so at an early age in the military, you and I, those that serve, that's driven into us strongly. And I think most often that lesson takes for the rest of our lives. It's in there, it's imprinted, and we act accordingly. I think that for the most part, that's true for most guys I've ever known and women that have been that are veterans.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, you bring up a point a second ago that you were talking about the knowing when to be quiet. Don't let it hurt your feelings. And that seems to be a hot topic, especially in today's world where everybody's feelings seem to matter.
Mhm.
And it's not always that way, especially, you being in a combat zone at that point. There's not enough time for that. It's, life and death, and you have to make decisions and go. So,
Good point. Yeah, instant orders is important. I would say, and I think this is something worthwhile mentioning, people in the military, we're not robots. We have a mind, we think. The notion is we fight as a team. And there's a mission that we're supposed to be doing. And as you well know, in these missions, there's give and take. There's back and forth in talking about how we're going to do this. We're going to be inserted here. Now, what are we going to do? What do you expect us to do? This is
mhm.
how we think it will go down, and so forth. And then you go into combat. And here's where I think people don't really understand this notion. You and I know there's a thing called Murphy's Law. If it can be screwed up, I'm cleaning it up. It will be screwed up.
Yeah.
And then there's not widely known, there's also O'Toole's law. And O'Toole's law is that Murphy was an optimist. So we go in, as you well know, we are prepared for the worst case scenario. And most often in combat, count on something happening that isn't going to be a good thing. So
Right.
then you prepare for the worst, you hope for the best. But when chaos happens, Mike Tyson gave a famous comment one time. Everybody's got a plan until then, now it's on.
Yeah.
You need to be quick on your feet, leader, be able to turn on a dime and lead from the front. So you can't be stupid and
Hmm.
and do that job. People don't appreciate that. Be a successful soldier, sailor, so forth. You cannot be dull-witted. You've got to have your wits about you and your self-discipline. And we fight as a team. If all that happens, chances are the result at the end of the day will be a favorable one. Not always, but the odds are in your favor the more disciplined and focused and nimble-minded you are and flexible that you can be. All that matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. So you did your 12 months in Vietnam, and you come back at this point. And when you come back, what was your responsibility? Where were you going at that point?
At that point, we came to tell you that I'm about 6'5", 240. As you can see, no hair now. Any age is either falling off or sagging or wrinkling but I was 6'4", about 2 1/4. Too big, too ugly for people to spit on me. But walking through O'Hare Airport, when we flew back from
Hmm.
Vietnam, went to Travis Air Force Base by San Francisco, got on a plane, flew to Chicago. My wife Sandy was with her parents in Riverside, Illinois. So naturally, I want to get back to where she is as quickly as I can. And
Right.
as I'm walking through O'Hare Airport, I do remember there were a few groups of people that would just turn their back on you, like you were, I don't know, uh,
Wow.
an undesirable person or something.
Hmm.
I didn't respond to any of that, of course. I just wanted to get on through. Did that. So we had orders to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, the First
Hmm.
Battalion, 6 Marines, 1-6,
Yeah,
famous unit from World War One.
that's right.
And we went there, and there was a lot going on at that point. I think, and I was a reserve officer, so I had about what was it, maybe a year and 2 months before my enlistment would be done.
Okay.
Well, I heard that the Marine Corps has tryouts. They were having tryouts for the Quantico Marines football team. Marine Corps had a football team
Ah,
in Quantico,
yeah.
and they would play different colleges and universities around the country. So I had played at Northern, and I went out and I ran some wind sprints and did some things, and I got orders then to Quantico.
Oh,
So went
wow.
up to Quantico and played football for that season on through the season was late 1970,
Okay.
and we had Marines obviously that had played football. Some were professional football players, some were
Mm,
semi-pros. Some had
right.
been to big colleges, some small colleges, and a couple no college. And most of us had been to Vietnam. So we were a bit of a coaching challenge, if you will. If 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 the attitudes were all, we were motivated, we could compete with pretty much anybody. On the other side of the coin, if the mojo wasn't with us on a particular day, there wasn't much the coach could do. He couldn't threaten to basically shave our head and send us to Vietnam. That wasn't going to work.
Right.
So it was a good place to decompress, Andrew, honestly.
Yeah.
At that point, football, the allure of football, I went through the season, I played safety just like I played at Northern, but like I mentioned before, youth and laughter are long gone. And besides, my guys are back in Vietnam. My unit's still
Hmm.
there. That's my team. So my mind on the guys, what was going on. And there were no iPhones, no way to pick up a
Right.
phone and find out what's going on, guys. I think at one point I sent a blistering letter patrol leaders over in Vietnam jumping on them about, you don't write, you don't tell me what's going on. I need to know what's happening. Keep me informed. All the rest of that. So
Wow.
played that season. At one point there, and I've got a high school degree at this point. No, I didn't finish college. So what to do? So talking to Sandy, we decided that I would basically apply for a regular commission in the Marine Corps.
To all the listeners out there, if you're struggling and need some help, anything like that, you can always dial 988, press option 1. You can go to Veterans Crisis Line, click on the chat icon. You can also text 838-255. Any of those options are going to put you in contact with somebody that can help you out. But just remember, one veteran life loss is one too many. I care about you. I know Lynn cares about you. The whole veteran community cares about you. So please reach out for help. And if you're out there, you're not struggling, you're doing well, then call and reach out to your buddies that you served with and ask them how they're doing. If they need a helping hand, please help them. All right, Lynn, one last time, thank you. I appreciate you. You had some great stuff here, and I'm sure everybody else is going to love it just as much as me. So thanks again for coming on. Truly, truly an honor. To all the listeners out there, stay motivated, change your socks.